Residing in the windswept plains north of Yt, the Jogos Nhai are a nomadic people, very similar to the Dothraki. They are proud, restless, warlike, and live daily life on the saddles of their mounts or in tents. Unlike the Dothraki, however, they ride Zorses. Plains are too dry and infertile for horses to inhabit. They are also shorter and stouter than the Dothraki, and also less appealing, with pointed skulls caused by the custom of binding the heads of newborns. Men are said to shave their entire heads except for a single strand, while the women shave all the hair from their body. Rather than traveling in large hordes, the Jogos Nhai move in small bands held together by blood. These bands are usually commanded by a male Jat, which means war chief, and female moonsinger, which is a healer, priestess, and judge. Thus, there is greater gender equality among the Jogos Nhai, with women being valued for their intellect and patience, and the men for their strength and battle prowess. Unlike the Dothraki, there is very little violence and animosity between bands. This is because the gods of the Jogos Nhai forbid them from shedding the blood of their own people. Raids between bands are carried out from time to time, but this is only part of a ritual.
That sounds pretty cool.
One thing that I thought of right away was how could the Jogos Nhai be effective if they don't have the large hordes that the Dothraki have? Because if it's just small bands, how do they take down entire cities, in the way that ancient Mongolians did,
I'd imagine they'd have to, every now and then you get a great leader who weaves them all into one great horde and they go conquer stuff, but then when he or she dies, they all dissipate again. It's the status quo to be in small groups, but occasionally they'll get together if, when they're about to be annihilated by the Yeti, they all band together under Zorse face.
Also, their smaller numbers are still probably pretty, formidable. The Dothraki are 20, 30, 40,000. If these are still a couple thousand per per group, that they can still do some damage, especially if they're not fighting each other. They're focused on, the cities and everyone else.
Yeah, rather than being this huge cavalry charge, they're sort of just lots of different units kind of working together and weaving together for a single purpose.
The first thing I thought of is just, a power ranking of what would happen if Jogos Nhai went to war with Dothraki. Say you took, a really powerful group of Jogos Nhai and had them, for whatever reason, cross over the Bone Mountains and into the Dothraki Sea and have them encounter Dothraki. How would that encounter go? How would they perceive one another? Would one perceive the other as superior or inferior, and for what reasons? What do you guys think?
Well, the Dothraki perceive everyone but them to be inferior, so I'm pretty sure that's what they would think. They'd be like, pointy heads. We'll call you penis heads.
But I wonder if the Jogos Nhai would do the exact same thing to them,
I don't know why, I feel like the Jogos Nhai probably are more organized and would be able to fight together as a unit, because when I think of the Dothraki, I just think of these wildly, Dothraki screamers and just going with all their blood-curdling attacks and everything. But I don't know. I think these guys would be probably take that in stride and do some damage.
And you see in the first book how easily the Dothraki society crumbles once the leader falls. They all revert back into these little packs and are, viciously fighting each other for dominance. And the whole 40,000 moving nation that was under Khal Drogo just disintegrates overnight, whereas the bands do work together. They have a common connection with one another.
Yeah, they seem to be suited for their environment. So it seems like if you had to make morphological comparisons, the Dothraki and their horses are perhaps bigger and stronger and even faster, you could even say. But it seems like the Zorses and the Jogos Nhai are more designed for endurance, and so it seems like their area doesn't have as much fertile grass that that's needed to sustain these large hordes, but they can survive off of much less for a lot longer. So it seems like when you were to compare the two, it would probably make a big difference as far as what the environment was if they were to have a fictional combat. If they were to fight in the plains of Jogos Nhai, I don't think the Dothraki would last because they would just all starve and their horses would get dehydrated. Whereas if this was in the Dothraki Sea, I wonder if the Dothraki would just overwhelm them with their numbers.
Yeah, they definitely use the Jogos Nhai definitely use the land, the inhospitability of the land to their advantage. They draw enemies into it, at which point the enemies have no source of food, no water, they're dry, their horses are dying and crumble. So they're very strategic in the way they attack people and separate them and isolate their enemies. And I imagine a lot of it is just raiding, so they'll raid villages quickly and sharply before disappearing. And if it comes, they can deal with them out in their own territory.
Yeah, it's almost like a Dornish version of the Dothraki, you know?
Yeah, Sandsteeds versus Zorses. Don't know which is more applicable or more useful.
One thing that I did way back when I started reading about the Zorses, because I knew that Zorses, like, that's a real thing on our planet too, and I just started thinking about, like, why is it that, like, zebras were never used as horses? And I did this super deep, like, Wikipedia, Google deep dive on, like, the history of zebras and Zorses and, like, you know, like, what efforts, if any, existed.
Yeah.
And what scientific reasons may explain why, you know, Africans frankly just never used as in the same way horses were used in Eurasia. And the thing that I kept coming across was it just seemed like there's real temperamental differences between zebras and horses, even though they're morphologically very similar. Zebras just you can't, like, it seemed like you can't break a zebra in the same way that you can break a horse and domesticate it. There's like these anecdotal explanations I came across that said if you took a bunch of zebra and put them in like a truck, you know, the same way that you can do that with horses. If like one person tried doing that, and at the end of their trip they opened up the back and found all the zebras dead because the zebras all just kick each other to death. Like, that's how aggressive they are.
Okay. So they can't really be tamed?
Yeah, they can't really be tamed. They can't really be domesticated. They also defend themselves slightly different from, say, wild horses. Wild horses will defend themselves by kicking out with one leg, whereas zebras defend themselves by kicking out with two legs, which is a lot more apparently difficult and life-threatening and damaging, which is what allows them to survive in the African Serengeti or whatever. But it was really interesting to me, just like this basic question of, like, okay, so like if zebras seem very much like horses, why weren't they ever used in that way? Could they be used in that way? Could we just get a bunch of zebra, raise them as babies, and, you know, use them as horses? Is that even possible? And it seems like the answer to that question is no, and it has been tried several times, you know?
Yeah, but I think the Zorses aren't zebras, are they? They're like a horse-zebra hybrid, or they're a horse with zebra DNA in them?
Yeah, in our world, that's what you call the hybrids.
Yeah.
I have knowledge.
Oh, share it, Amber.
Knowledge.
A wild Amber has appeared.
Only because somebody just posted something about this on Facebook the other day. But a Zorse specifically is, I believe, a male zebra with a female horse. It has more of the appearance of the zebra, but it has the temperament and the breakability, I guess, of a horse.
So Zorses would be domesticatable?
Yeah. My husband says hello.
Okay. Hello, Amber's husband.
So they're kind of horse. They have a horse face and they're kind of stripedy, but they actually like can be ridden and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay,
I wonder though, in our real planet history, you know, if it was really possible to breed Zorses because of the geographic separation between wild horses and wild zebras. There really wasn't a lot of overlap, right?
Let's see, yeah, because zebras were just in Africa and horses were just in Asia and Eurasia. So yeah,
exactly.
Only recently people have been having some fun with horses and zebras.
Oh boy.
Okay, let's move on a little bit. So, yeah, as we mentioned, instead of fighting each other, the Jogos Nhai focus their battle lust against the neighboring civilizations, whom they live in a state of perpetual war with. According to legend, Jogos Nhai slew the last of the Joquin stone giants during the battle in the Howling Hill. They carried out constant attacks upon Ingai, I think it's pronounced, reducing the once proud kingdom to a single city, Nefer. They've also fought bitterly against the warrior women of the Bones. So far, they've not prevailed, but the Moon Singers tell of a glorious time when They will spill over the bones and take the fertile lands beyond. Given the size of the Yeti hosts, they've been unable to attack them directly, but instead use guerrilla tactics, lure soldiers into ambushes, and raid Yeti towns and caravans. Several god emperors have attempted to lead campaigns to bring the horsemen to heel, but none have proven very successful. One famous conflict between the Jogos and the Yeti was waged by Zia, a female war chief in male clothing. Renowned for her cunning and lured the Yeti armies into the inhospitable plains and gradually killed their scouts, starved them, denied them water, used the land against them, and destroyed them one by one. The god emperor's skull was presented to Zia, dipped in gold as a drinking cup.
Yeah, and I think that's a great allusion to the historical conflict between the Chinese civilization and the Mongolian civilization, the constant war and acrimony that existed between the two.
Yeah, and I think UFL Gator, who couldn't make this call, but he's left an interesting historical note that warrior queen of the Mesogeti, after her defeat against Cyrus the Great, she cut his head off and dipped it in blood and gore. And before the battle, she promised that she would quench his thirst for blood. And all the Scythians and the Huns also gilded the skulls of their enemies and used them as drinking cups.
So did Carl Tanner of Janelli.
He did, yes, another great historical figure.
I wonder if that's where the Dothraki got their tradition of dipping what's his name's Viserys' head in gold, molten gold.
Is that a tradition yet? I mean, you need a second one to make it a tradition, right?
Maybe it is. I don't know. It may not be.
Don't the Golden Company do that with their forefathers? They dip them in the skulls in gold because they want to bring them back.
That's after they're That's after they're already dead, though.
Yeah, it's more for preservation, not to drink.
Right, not for big difference. I think there's a myth of not myth, but there's historical information in reference to an ancient Mongolian female warrior that I think was kind of made reference to in the Marco Polo Netflix series. That I wonder if this female queen from the Jogos Nhai is kind of an homage to.
There's certainly more gender equality in the Jogos Nhai than the Dothraki, because it says, one of Gildane's quotes is that a woman can assume a man's role, but she just has to dress like a man, and a man can do the same. But yeah, you just got to cross-dress.
So this would be a type of people that would be very, very like Caitlyn Jenner friendly. It sounds like, right?
They would think she is strong and brave.
So it sounds like they're actually they're very progressive on their transgender equality.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've actually assigned characteristics to the gender, but either sex can embody that gender. So if you want to be a warrior, you have to put on a warrior's gear. If you want to be a priestess and a caretaker and a prophesizer, then you have to put on that.
I don't know how much acceptance it is as more of just rules is rules, and that's what they do, But, I don't think any people, transgender people would have a particularly good time in any of these societies.
Wow, that's a very closed-off way of thinking about it, Greg.
I'm just being honest.
You can't be too nostalgic about these people, yeah.
the good old days.
Because I picture just really progressive ideals, and I feel like they all take a tea-time break and start discussing really philosophical
TED Talks.
TED Talks.
ET TED Talks.
Seven things that the Dothraki do that suck. You know what I mean? Like conversations that there's like a Jogos Nhai clickbait conversation they'll have.
Yeah. There's a couple of references to them throughout the A Song of Ice and Fire books. Not many, but in Karth, a pair of Jogos Nhai present Dany with Zorse as a token to the Mother of Dragons, and there are also Jogos Nhai fighters amongst the pit fighters in Meereen, in Daznak's pit.
Supposedly,
they get a couple of cameos.
And in Bravos as well, apparently the Moon Singers said something about Bravos will be their salvation. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. They pretty much invented Bravos.
Yeah, there must have been a prominent slave faction on that fleet that escaped, which is really interesting.
Yeah, I'm personally doing just my own personal reread of the entire A Song of Ice and Fire series. I'm somewhere in Feast Dance right now, and every time I come across in any of the books, any of these small references to Jogos Nhai or ET or whatever, I always light up because I'm like, wow, like these actually existed, and this has existed in George's head for the longest time, and it's so cool to actually see because I think the encyclopedia really helped those cultures come to life and not just have them be obscure references in this story, which is what I think they were for a lot of people in the beginning.
Yeah, I do remember them from the first book because Danny sees them in Vaes Dothrak, and they sound very much like the Dothraki. But I thought they were like a rival nation, and the Dothraki and the Jogos Nhai were like at war because obviously we hadn't heard about the Bone Mountains that separated them, but they obviously have a common heritage. Should we move on to Yeti or Leng?
Might as well go back to Yeti.
I say Yeti.
Yeti?
Because Leng is related to Yeti.
Yeah.
True, yes. Okay.